When the gates to other dimensions opened, Earth burned under swarms of alien beasts and twisted humanoids. Betrayed by his own allies and left to die, Li touched the brink of oblivion, and the darkness answered. From his shadow rose a power that devours metal, flesh, and souls. Every death feeds him. Every enemy strengthens the swarm. In a world drowned in monsters, one man's vengeance walks in shadow. Can a man consumed by shadows still claim humanity? Let's find out. Li's story is quite complicated. They used beasts to kill his parents, told him to take a loan from a loan shark, forced him to work in the mines, and tried to kill him the same way they did to his parents. And so he wondered, is he destined to die quietly, like some ant? But why? Why are these idiots controlling his life and death? He just wants revenge. He wants to get back everything that was taken from him. Then the dark shadow system activated, and he decided to exterminate the trash and monsters who killed his family and drag them all to hell. Ants crushed in the mud are monsters, most capable of gnawing their way to the throne, and he made his way to it. It all started when the loan sharks came to him after his parents' death, so that he would now pay off their debt. Then MC exclaimed that his parents died working for them. They should be the ones paying him compensation. When he was working in the mine, one of his colleagues exclaimed that if he had awakened, then they had some hope. Even if 1 in 1,000 awakens, someone has to take the risk. Li didn't understand why he should be the one to take the risk. Why don't they try it themselves? They are afraid of dying, and he has to suffer from this? And now bleeding, he wondered this question. Why him? Why must he endure all this? The humanoid who was pursuing him pierced his body with its hand, and he screamed loudly in pain, wondering if all this was because he was weak. It was at that moment that he was filled with strength, because who decided that the weak should die quietly? The humanoid threw him to the ground, and the system began connecting with his body and analyzing the data. A few seconds later, the dark shadow system activated, and he was ready to respond to the enemy attack. How did it all come to this? Let's go back in time a little. The main character's name is Li Yi. He is an experienced interdimensional miner. His job is to wear a protective suit and risk his life mining energy stones in another dimension. As they were leaving for their next mission, his boss said things were looking good this month. Maybe at this rate, he could pay off his parents' debts in a year. He needed to work for another 3 or 5 years, and maybe he could even buy himself a small apartment. MC smiled awkwardly and promised him that he would work hard, then clenched his teeth in irritation and mentally called him a heartless capitalist. He'd leave here as soon as he paid everything off. Work here for another 3 or 5 years? Let him toil away at this job himself. They climbed into trucks and drove through the portal. Exposure to radiation in the interdimensional zone gives normal people a 1 in 1,000 chance of awakening, but it is mortally dangerous. If life hadn't worked out this way, who would agree to wear this suit and work in another world? As they were heading to their destination, his colleagues started discussing him. One of them turned to his friend and asked, was this him he was talking about? A guy whose parents died in an accident 3 years ago. Not only did he not receive compensation, but he was also deeply in debt. His friend confirmed this and said that NG Corporation claimed that his parents caused $1 million in damages. He felt so sorry for this poor guy. His colleague asked discontentedly, why did he feel sorry for him? He thought he was just a weakling. If he were in his place, he would fight to the death for this corporation to repay him for everything. His friend said that he thought he wanted them to pay for it with their lives, and he asked in response, is he an idiot? What's the point of paying blood for blood? It's better to get some money. Lai heard them perfectly well. He gritted his teeth in displeasure and thought, they called him a weakling? Sometimes a person becomes weak not by his own will, but because this society, this world, everyone has gone crazy. The truck stopped at the entrance to the mine. Their boss said it was time to start work, but as soon as they wanted to go inside, the ground shook. The guy exclaimed in fear. Was it a cave-in? His colleague exclaimed, some kind of small earthquake. Why was he yelling so much? The man got worried, because he had never heard of earthquakes in other dimensions, and his friend agreed with him. He works in many zones and has never seen anything like this. The man became worried. Maybe there are monsters there? Because of his words, the others also began to get nervous, and one of them said that then they probably shouldn't work here. He heard that there are interdimensional humanoids here, even stronger than the clan of bugs and monsters. The others agreed with him, and their boss furiously ordered them to shut up. This place was cleared of the awakened 3 years ago. There can't be any humanoids here. He wanted to say something else, but the monster attacked him from behind, and his subordinates stared at him in shock, not believing their eyes. Their boss glanced at the monster that had injured him, and the others shouted that the inspector had just been stabbed by a humanoid. They scattered in panic, and the humanoids emerged from the portal and began pursuing. MC ran toward the exit of the dimension and thought that it was still about 17 kilometers away. Was there any point in running at all? He glanced at the monsters that were dealing with his colleagues and kept running, thinking that they definitely couldn't withstand this. One of the humanoids threw a man at him, knocking him down, and the two of them hitting a rock. Meanwhile, the others ran to the truck and drove away, not caring at all that some didn't make it in time. Li extended his hand, asking them to wait and take him with them, and then the humanoid leaped onto the truck, and with a clanking sound, ripped through the roof with its sharp claws. He pulled out 2 miners and ran to the side, and the truck fell and burst into flames. The remaining miners began to climb out of the truck, and the humanoids, noticing this, immediately rushed towards them. MC, meanwhile, remained in place and watched everything from the side, and then the truck exploded and the humanoids were thrown aside. Lee shielded his face from the heat that hit him and watched as the humanoids immediately burst into bright flames and began screaming loudly. He immediately realized that their weakness was fire, and, glancing at the torches behind him, decided to try to attack them. But before he could take a step, a monster pounced on him from the right. Before he could strike, he lunged for the torch and grabbed it, then immediately turned around and began waving it, scaring the monsters away. The humanoids didn't dare approach him, and he only confirmed his guess, after which he told his colleagues that these creatures were afraid of fire. 10 years ago, mysterious gates suddenly appeared all over the world. Insects, animals, and humanoids from other dimensions poured onto Earth through these gates. Only the awakened advanced ones, mutated by radiation, had the strength to fight these monsters. The emergence of the advanced ones gave humanity the strength to close the gates and open a new era of exploitation of energy resources and other worlds. But unfortunately, they are not advanced. They are just simple miners, and mere survival in this world is very expensive for them. They don't even have the strength to run from the monsters. After his warning, the miners began running to the burning truck and taking everything that could burn. One of the miners, with trembling hands, took a torch and said that it would soon go out, and then the MC said that they had a warehouse with fuel there. They could use the fire to block the entrance until help arrived. He told everyone to stand back to back. They needed to form a semicircle and slowly retreat towards the mine. They all followed his order and began to slowly approach the entrance of the mine, where the barrels of fuel were standing. As soon as they approached it, Lee turned around and told his colleagues to quickly pour fuel onto the entrance. They knocked over the barrels, and as soon as the fuel spilled to the feet of the humanoids, they threw down the torches, and the fire immediately flared up upon contact with the liquid and burned one of the monsters. They ran into the cave, and the man, putting his hand on Lee's shoulder, thanked him. If it weren't for him, everyone here would be dead. His colleague agreed with him and said that if he needed anything, he should just say so. He would definitely help him. MC didn't answer them. His attention was drawn to a huge statue standing in the back of a truck. The miners also glanced at it and said that they found it a long time ago in the mine. Inspector Wong probably wanted to take it away and sell it on the black market. That's why it was here. Lee noted that, judging by its appearance, the statue had been here for years, and in the meantime, they were contacted by radio and a man said that they were attacked by humanoids and they urgently needed help. They were told in response that help would arrive only in 2 hours and advised them to take care of their own safety. The man, hearing this, asked in shock, "Can't they arrive earlier?" But no one else answered him. Only static came from the radio. The miners became worried, and one of them asked what they were going to do now. His suit only had energy left for an hour and a half. His colleague said the same thing happened to him. He couldn't die. His wife and child were waiting for him at home. Another miner cursed and suggested they leave themselves. Even if just one of them got out, it would be better than them all dying here. Meanwhile, MC glanced at his wrist. His suit was currently charged at 61%, which was low. He hoped that help would arrive sooner, after which one of the miners drew attention to himself and said that their suits wouldn't last until help arrived, and someone would have to sacrifice themselves, like the elderly or orphans. He and 2 other men armed themselves with shovels and threateningly walked toward the others, after which he pointed at Li Yi and said that in their world, he was attached to nothing, and besides, he was deep in debt. Life for him was nothing but torment. Let him give him the charge of his suit. MC clenched his teeth in rage, after which the man hit him on the arm with a stick and exclaimed, "He still dares to snap back? He thinks he can resist him?" He grabbed his arm in pain and fell to his knees, and the man told him to resist. They would look at him. After that, his friend took off his mask and grabbed him by the neck, saying that if he was lucky, he would be exposed to radiation and become awakened. His buddy agreed with him and said that if he became one, he would save them all. He would become their hero. They let him go and threw his mask away, and he crawled after it, saying that if he became awakened, the first thing he would do would be to kill them. His colleague said he had a 1 in 1,000 chance. He thinks he's that lucky? His buddy reached for his battery, after which they headed toward the other miners and asked who wanted to be next. The 3 men remained silent, after which one of them pushed his comrades toward them and told them to take the batteries from them. After that, he ran to the truck, and the miners rushed after him. Realizing that he wanted to leave without them, they ordered him to stop. And he, meanwhile, got into the driver's seat and exclaimed that if they were to die, then only together. After that, he accelerated, causing the statue to fall to the ground with a crash, and then drove to the exit, and one of the miners shouted to the others to stop him. If he breaks through the fire, it will be the end for them. But they did not have time. He drove through the fire, and the humanoids ran into the cave. And Lee, meanwhile, looked at the statue that fell in front of him and asked, "Is he laughing?" Seeing a wide smile on the statue's face, he exclaimed, "Is even this statue mocking him?" Immediately after that, a humanoid appeared in front of him, crushed the head of the statue and extended a bloody hand to him, and he looked up and wondered, why did he have to endure all this? The humanoid grabbed his head, and with its other hand pierced his body, and he thought, is it all because he is weak? Many voices appeared in his head, telling him to leave. His parents are dead, so he should not think that they, his poor relatives, will raise him. His parents' death doesn't concern him at all. If he can't pay the rent, then let him leave. Just because his parents died doesn't mean he doesn't have to pay them. He remembered how the people from the corporation came to him, and the most senior one asked, are you crazy? He wants to investigate his parents' death and sue the corporation. He threw a stack of papers in his face and said that all the complaints he sent out had all gotten to him. He doesn't need compensation. He needs the truth. He'll give him the truth. The whole point is that his brainless parents broke the rules, which led to the accident. Not only will they not pay him compensation, but they'll also sue him for the millions the company had to pay for them. After that, he left, and his people stayed to mock him. MC tried to hold back the man's leg as he tried to hit him, but he didn't have the strength, so he punched him in the face and said that if he had agreed to compensation in the tens of thousands, none of this would have happened, but he still wanted to know the truth. Now he had to collect 30,000 in monthly interest and the principal for 3 years. He would send people every 15th, and if there was no money, he shouldn't blame them for their cruelty. He fell to the ground from his punch, and the man said he looked pathetic, so he would give him a chance. Let him go work as an interdimensional miner. It was the only job where he had a chance to pay everything back. And now, looking into the face of the humanoid who had injured him, he thought that he would die anyway, but even if that happened, he wouldn't make things easier. He sank his teeth into the monster's shoulder and wondered, what if he was weak? Who decided that the weak should die quietly? Feeling the pain, the humanoid immediately threw him away, and he, falling to the ground, mentally noted that he smelled so bad, it was simply disgusting. Then the creature that was imprisoned in the statue appeared. The shadow looked at him mockingly and said that he thought he had gained some kind of powers, but it turned out that this was just meaningless torment before death. Lee responded that at least he bit him. And what did he do? He was just a useless statue that the monster smashed to pieces. He answered him that now he was the only one who could help him. He just needed to be obedient and give him his body. He shouted that he was not interested. He would rather die than let someone control his body, especially an idiot like him. The shadow laughed at him and asked if he would rather die than obey him. But did he really think he had the right to refuse? The humanoid wanted to crush Li Yi, but at that moment the dark shadow system activated and streams of dark energy began to emanate from its body. They moved to the monster, wrapped around its entire body and forced it to bow its head, and the shadow took control of Li Yi's body and, raising its leg over the monster, asked if it was he who destroyed his statue. After that, it kicked, crushing the humanoid, and said that it did not forget the insults. A menacing roar of the monster was heard behind him. He turned around, noticing the noise here. Then dark energy stretched from his feet to the monster, preventing it from moving, and he ordered it to disappear. The humanoid tried to escape his grip, but the shadows quickly formed a dome and prevented it from escaping, decapitating it. The humanoid's head fell next to him, and he noted that the stench emanating from it was truly disgusting. After that, he went to the miners he had captured and decided to deal with them. Seeing this, they became very nervous and asked what he was doing. If he dared to touch them, they would report him. At this point, MC became curious about what would happen if he gave the shadow his body, and then went to the miners, and they began to beg him for mercy. He couldn't do this to them, because they were just trying to survive. Besides, without them, he wouldn't have become advanced. Maybe they were a little cruel, but he awakened, didn't he? He asked in response. So now he should thank them? The miner nervously exclaimed that they didn't need gratitude. Let him just pretend that nothing happened and let them go. Lee told them that he would not only let them go, but also help them. After that, he snapped his fingers, pulling off 2 of their masks, which immediately exposed them to radiation and made them cough up blood. After removing the batteries from their suits, he went to the rest of the miners, and they nervously asked him not to kill them, since they hadn't done anything to him. Since they really hadn't done anything to him, he decided to help them and handed over the batteries, after which the shadow advised him to save his unnecessary pity, since it would only kill him. It exited his body, and he, heading for the exit, told him to shut up, since he didn't need his instructions. The shadow said that he would see if he remained as strong when he was on the verge of death. As soon as MC exited the mine, he saw many humanoids approaching him and said that he didn't expect so many of them to gather near the cave. The shadow demanded that he give up his body or fight this trash himself, but Li Yi wasn't going to do that and prepared to face the monsters. The shadow noticed that his legs were already shaking just from the sight of this rabble. Let him think carefully. Without his strength, he was nothing. Pulling himself together, he jumped high into the air, dodging the humanoid's attack, and shouted that he had said he didn't need his instructions. After that, he dodged another attack from the monster and thought how easy it was for him. The humanoid swung its hand, delivering a blow that he blocked, but he didn't expect another monster to attack him from behind. He noticed it and reacted quickly, jumping to the side, after which he stopped nearby and thought that even his reflexes and speed had improved. At that moment, the humanoid pounced on him, and the shadow asked, "Is this all he can do?" Even with the shadow system, he looked so pitiful. His words angered MC once again, and he, gathering his shadow power into a fist, punched the humanoid and, in a rage, ordered it to shut up. Seeing how far the monster flew after his blow, he looked at his fist in surprise and wondered why he had so much power. Noticing that the humanoid was still moving, he realized that simply using its body to attack wasn't enough to harm them. If only he had a weapon. As soon as he thought this, a shadow blade appeared in his hand and he looked at it in surprise, then noticed the monster pounce on him and prepared to attack. As soon as it approached, he swung his dagger, dealing it a powerful blow, and smirked, thinking that now he too could kill these monsters. Had he really become advanced already? 2 humanoids immediately pounced on him, and a third came behind him, and he took a blow from it. Turning around, he immediately attacked in response, cutting off its head, after which he rushed to the rest of the monsters and thought that he finally had the strength to fight. Time passed. Soon all the monsters in the area were dealt with, and he lay down to rest. His breathing was ragged after such a fierce fight, and he received a notification from the system that the evolution was successful. He had reached the E rank. Soon after, help arrived and he was taken to the hospital. A nurse examined him and said that there were no external injuries. He himself was not sick. Why hadn't he woken up yet? The doctor said that awakened advanced beings are always like this, because his physical strength has noticeably increased, so his body now needs time to adapt. Hearing that he was advanced, the nurse smiled and asked what level he was. The doctor noticed that she was so happy and suggested that they talk about it when he came to his senses. He called her to the next room, but she did not want to leave and asked him to stay a little longer. He was so handsome. As soon as they left, a shadow appeared over Lee's body and asked why it had to be a human. Such a weak creature, and only an E rank at that. With his status and power, after awakening, he should be at least S rank, B rank at worst. And now he'll have to stick around in this weak shell. But the curious thing is that such a weak guy was able to adjust the power of the shadow system and achieve shadow manifestation on the first try. It's a pity, of course, that this happened to him. A person of E rank won't be able to withstand even a tenth of his power. At this moment, MC came to his senses. He looked up at him and asked, "It's him again? What is he, and why is he pestering him again?" The shadow looked down at him arrogantly and said that he is the Lord of Chaos and Peace from the most ancient great clan, the Lord of Prisons and Countless Worlds. He orders him to give him his body. When he reclaims the throne taken by the traitors of his clan, he will repay him generously. MC remained silent and thought, what great clan is he even talking about? Nothing but bragging poured from his mouth. He's as disgusting as a cockroach, just as dark and ugly. He'll never give his body to someone like that in his life, even after death. Meanwhile, the Overlord heard all his thoughts and was very outraged that he called him a dark and ugly cockroach. He again ordered him to give him his body. This was the only thing of value in his existence. But Lee remained silent again and thought, why was he clinging to him? Was he now possessed by this spirit? Maybe it desired his body in a different sense? He was acting crazy. He better not provoke it. What if it forcibly took his body? Well, it's not exactly impossible. The gender of this creature is impossible to determine. He hastened to discard this thought and thought that with such an appearance, he would not be able to endure it, even if he himself really wanted it. Maybe he should end his life to show his determination, and then he would leave him alone? Perhaps everything would work out if he explained to him that they physically couldn't do it. And if he angered him, it would lead to destruction. He would decide to die himself and drag everyone down with him. A heart sacrificed to a demon is the path to the world of the dead. And if in the realm of death they become one, what should he do then? Overlord winced at this stream of thoughts, then waved his hand and ordered him to stop. What kind of madman's ravings were this? He grabbed him by the clothes and thought that if he wanted to do it himself, why did he have to choose an E-rank person? If the situation weren't so critical, even a half-dead dog would have done better than trash like him. He threw him into the newly opened portal and exclaimed that he would give him 3 days. If he didn't reach D-rank within that time, he would rip him to shreds. MC looked around and, realizing he was now in some kind of cave, asked, wasn't he just in the hospital? What was this place? The Overlord told him that within this hellish world was his clan's trial for the E-rank, the insect lair. Each clan member could only attempt this trial once after coming of age. Lee noticed that it had taken over his body, so the number of trials had been refreshed. An armored beetle then emerged from the darkness, and he asked why it looked familiar. It told him that the shadow system he'd passed on to him granted access to his knowledge, and he should get used to it. MC became slightly nervous, thinking about this system, then drew his dagger and engaged the beetle. It swung its pincers furiously, and Lee parried every blow, thinking that everything was happening so quickly. At one point, the monster screamed and pounced on it, thinking that he needed to attack its blind spot, its back. But as soon as he struck, his dagger clanged back, and the recoil sent him flying slightly. He landed behind the beetle, and then it turned around and immediately struck him, which he blocked, but was almost thrown back. He helped himself to his feet by plunging his dagger into the ground, and thought about how tough this monster's shield was. The Overlord called him useless, and asked, is this his only tactic? Is he only going to use brute force? MC pounced on the beetle and exclaimed that it shouldn't care how he fights, and he, with a disgruntled sigh, said that if he was going to lose, then he shouldn't scream for help. Li Yi continued to strike his opponent and cursed, wondering if this beetle even had a weakness. With each strike, his dagger clanged off the beetle's steel claws. At one point, he was unable to respond to the attack and was thrown back, causing his back to slam into the wall with all his might. The Overlord ordered him to get up, and he glanced at the green liquid on his hand, then glanced at one of the beetle's legs, and realized it was blood. He had managed to wound it after all. He chuckled, saying that he had finally found its weakness, after which the beetle pounced on him in a rage. He prepared to attack, thinking that it would prove he was no weakling. Noticing the shadows emanating from him, the Overlord frowned and wondered if this was shadow perception. Immediately after this, MC rushed forward, cutting off the monster's leg, and the Overlord asked, is all this effort just for this? And what's the use? He replied that without one leg for defense, attacking a weak spot would be much easier. He didn't understand what weak spot he was talking about, and Li Yi thought he needed a more effective weapon. His dagger transformed into a long spear, after which he jabbed it into the beetle's abdomen and ordered it to get up. The blow jolted the beetle, and he exclaimed that the bug wasn't moving because its weak spot was its abdomen. After that, he delivered another blow, which finished off the monster. Drops of blood and a blue crystal fell to the ground, and he caught his breath, saying that he had won, and the Overlord asked, he only killed an armored beetle and is already tired? After that, he took the crystal and felt a sharp surge of strength, and the Overlord told him that it was an energy stone. It could increase the level of his abilities. The system reported that the progress of the breakthrough to rank D had increased by 0.2%, and he asked, so this thing is good for accumulating experience? After that, some sounds started coming from the holes in the ceiling, and he said that something was coming here, but he couldn't see anything. Overlord suggested that he use his shadow sense and see who was there, and he asked what kind of skill it was. He told him that he only needed to focus the shadow energy in his eyes to activate it. After that, he closed his eyes and concentrated, and then opened them and said that he understood everything. He saw another beetle nearby. It released sharp spikes at him, but he quickly reacted and dodged. The spike pierced the wall and the poison inside it hissed, after which the beetle attacked Li Yi again and exclaimed, what is it that flies so fast? Feeling several spikes heading his way, he dodged, then began sprinting from side to side to avoid being hit. An Overlord exclaimed that his shadow sense was useless. Why couldn't he see anything properly? He replied that it wasn't the skill that was useless, but that he simply didn't have the strength. He concentrated, deciding to gather more energy, and Overlord frowned. He hadn't thought that some weakling could manipulate his energy so skillfully. This was getting more and more interesting. MC, meanwhile, saw information about his opponent using a skill. In front of him was a Distortion Reaper beetle, better known as a Master Reaper, and a Sting Gunner, an expert in long-range poisonous spike attacks. All of these monsters were E rank. The Overlord noted that he had already reviewed the information and asked him to wait so as not to distract him. He looked around the cave and exclaimed that there were too many of these bugs. The Overlord said that among humans, they say that if you see only one cockroach, it means there are tons of them in the dark. Immediately after, the bugs rushed to attack. Li Yi retreated to the wall and prepared himself, and the Overlord remarked that this was not bad. He even knew the right position to take to avoid being attacked from all sides. MC made 2 daggers at once, then waved his hands and released shadow energy, commanding all the monsters to retreat from him. The surge of energy knocked them back, and the Overlord asked, did he unlock the second level of shadow sense so quickly? It was a pleasant surprise. After that, the system reported that his shadow sense had reached level 2. When a shadow becomes his follower, his enemy's heartbeat turns into a funeral trill. He now has 3 abilities: Shadow Knowledge Archive, Shadow Sense, and Shadow Manifestation. He continued the battle with the beetles, dodging every strike from their sharp pincers and mentally noticing that his opponent had begun to move slower. Is this the effect of Shadow Sense? The system reported that the Stinger's weak points had been identified: the leg, tentacles, and abdomen. He saw the spots on its body highlighted in purple, and the Overlord said that this was the advantage of a second level of his skill. Once he saw its weak points, his attack would be able to penetrate its defense. Li Yi exclaimed that all their weak points were below and decided to try out a new technique. Shadow spikes emerged from the ground and pierced the beetles' flat bodies. This is a technique in which the shadows are driven into the ground, then rush upward, causing damage along the perimeter. After killing several beetles, he obtained 3 crystals, and his progress towards D rank increased to 2.7%. He thought, does that mean each kill only gives 0.7%? Since he figured out their weak points, finishing them off quickly wouldn't be difficult. He decided to finish them all off at once and rushed forward, easily striking their weak points. He didn't expect that level 2 shadow sense would improve the accuracy of his attacks so much. Meanwhile, his progress reached 5.3%. At one point, a beetle lunged at him. He instinctively leaned back, not understanding what had just happened. Overlord remarked that his reflexes were fast, but it was a pity his brain couldn't keep up. MC glanced at the monster flying above him and saw that it was a Distortion Reaper beetle. He used Shadow Manifestation and transformed his weapon into a lasso, then swung it and grabbed the beetle. Pulling it closer to him, he chopped off its head, and the system reported that it had identified the Reaper beetle's weak points. The femur, the point located between the pelvis and shin. He only needed to entangle it to restrict its movement. The remaining monsters didn't stand still and decided to attack him. They shot sharp spikes at him, and Li Yi, turning his lasso into sharp ropes, ran towards them and began swinging them, cutting off their stingers, and exclaimed that he would see how they would shoot without it. Meanwhile, the breakthrough progress reached 12%. Having dealt with the beetles, he attacked the remaining monsters with rope and ordered them all to disappear. The Overlord thought that he finally looked like a man worthy of this power, even though this pose was disgusting. The gift granted by the Eye of Shadow enhances one's senses, reflexes, strength, and gives control over shadows, hence the name Shadow Sense. But this gift takes a huge amount of moral energy, such as the price asked by the Eye of Shadows. But an E rank is still an E rank. He had already reached his limit. At this moment, the breakthrough progress reached 34%, and everything began to blur before Li Yi's eyes. He glanced at the monsters approaching him, and thought that it was very difficult for him to control such destructive power. But he had just gained the strength for revenge. How could he stumble here? Because of this, he missed an attack. A monster struck him in the back, and he took a stance, preparing for further attacks, and the system showed that 15 hours remained. He remembered those idiots from the NG Corporation. They dared to hide the truth about his parents' death, and shamelessly forced him to become a miner to pay off all his debts. He rushed to the attack, raising his breakthrough progress to 50%, and thought, was this all because he was an ordinary person? But now he had the power to change everything, and he will not give up. He will take revenge and drag those arrogant idiots to hell. He will force them to kneel and repent at the graves of his parents. In all the time he was struggling with these thoughts, about 15 hours had passed, and a huge pile of monster bodies had already accumulated under his feet. The breakthrough progress had reached 95%. The remaining time was 2 minutes. Overlord frowned and thought that human malice combined so well with the Dark Shadow system, it even fueled the shadow energy. He said that time was running out. He better hurry. The monsters continued to arrive, and Li Yi continued to kill them. The system reported that 15 seconds remained, and the breakthrough progress was at 97%. When 11 seconds remained, the progress was already almost 98. With 7 seconds left, he concentrated, and Overlord asked, does he want to release all the shadow energy at once? Isn't he afraid that his entire body will just explode? He told him that there was only a little time left to go further. The main thing was to become stronger, and for this, he was ready to sacrifice everything. When 2 seconds remained, he pounced on the horde of monsters heading towards him, and a bright purple trail stretched behind his dagger, and a system window appeared, indicating that his progress toward D-rank breakthrough was 100%. He had achieved D-rank. Qingchen noted, as Li Yi breathed heavily, that it had taken him a great deal of effort, but he could now call him a little D. The protagonist looked around and asked, is this really a weapon? He explained that this swarm used to be a testing ground for his people. This dagger, by human standards, is an A-rank weapon. MC raised the weapon with both hands and asked, is this really a dagger? Isn't this a great sword? Are they all giants? Qingchen said, crossing his arms, that compared to his shadow powers, this weapon was just a toy. Lu used his abilities to collect the weapons from the battlefield and said he disagreed with him. He asked, can they be used for other purposes? The protagonist remarked that it could be sold. However, only an advanced D rank can sell equipment, so they head to the registration hall. After a while, the protagonist shouted in shock, why an E rank? How is that possible? The manager noted that although his body stats are good, there are no noticeable energy fluctuations, hence his E-rank status. The records show that he is registered as a miner. At E-rank, his salary increases by 15%. Afterwards, outside, the MC remarked that the shadow system is wonderful, but the rank situation is very strange. Qingchen remarked that they don't notice the changes because the shadow system is invisible to the naked eye. Li Yi thoughtfully said that this means they won't see it, although perhaps that's for the best. However, selling equipment will be much more difficult. After a while, at the entrance to the black market, the protagonist thought that all the shady deals take place here. Qingchen declared that this sounded perfect for the shadow system. Afterwards, people asked in surprise, what's a miner doing here? Even the smell of ore dust permeated the interior. It was rare to see a miner come here. Qingchen, mentally communicating with Li Yi, remarked that humans were simply ridiculous. They attached some precious stone to metal and called it a divine weapon. He suddenly felt sorry for them all. The salesman said with displeasure that he needed to leave. Why would a miner come here? If he stained things with it, he wouldn't be able to compensate for it in 100 years of work. The protagonist asked, crossing his arms. Is this how they treat customers? He pointedly covered his nose with his fingers and asked if he could really be called a customer. He should look at himself from the outside. He was poor and shabby. What could he possibly afford here? The MC pulled out a weapon and declared that he didn't even like their merchandise. He should bring an appraiser, and they would see how much this dagger would fetch. Suddenly, Su Qing, an ordinary person, pointed out that he was a D-ranker. Why did he bring her to such a terrible place? D-rank Zhou Huo only chuckled. The salesman happily asked, politely addressing Huo, if he really brought a good item for sale. Huo said he had obtained an excellent dagger from the Gate of Other Worlds. He planned to sell it to buy his girlfriend a vehicle. He noted with astonishment that it was a Wind Howl sword. This weapon increases attack power. This is an excellent item for a D-rank. Li Yi addressed the girl by name, and she looked at him in astonishment, recalling the past. Qing irritably declared that his useless parents were no longer there. Didn't he receive millions in compensation? He should look at himself. He has no money and is completely in debt. A poor loser like him should better not associate with her. He is wasting her time. At this moment, Huo asked if she really knew him. She nervously asked if she could know some miner. Perhaps he was just a fan? He's probably just a fan. She streams, and people always recognize her. He asked irritably. Was he seriously addressing her by name? The standards of this place have gotten worse. Who let such trash in here? Aren't they worried it will lower the class of their establishment? The garbage collectors are down the street. Huo swung his weapon and gritted his teeth, saying that he should take his trash and go there while they're open. There was a clang of metal, and he asked in shock, holding a broken sword in his hands, how was this possible? The protagonist said with a grin that the trash was his sword. Qing screamed, how could this be? Didn't he say this sword could cut through iron and its price was very high? Huo muttered through his teeth, enraged that this was impossible. Then he rushed forward, using his abilities, and shouted, this trash wants to die. The protagonist, dodging the blow, thought that the opponent's movements were very slow. Huo furiously shouted, spinning around sharply. He had good reflexes, but how could he dodge something like that? MC calmly dodged the series of blows and thought that these blows were much weaker than those dealt by the swarm of insects. He thought through clenched teeth. Wasn't this guy a miner who wasn't even an E rank? Why couldn't he, the D ranker, hit him? Huo shouted, while Liu was using his abilities, that the miners needed to return to the hole they came from. The protagonist asked with a grin, so do dogs also need to return to where they came from? After the protagonist dealt a strong blow to his opponent, Qing cried out in concern, running up to him. MC chuckled and declared that Huo seemed to like being called a dog. Huo furiously shouted, calling him trash. Is he tired of living? Suddenly, Wang Defa, a D ranker, shouted that they should stop right now. He shouted in surprise. Could it really be the boss? Defa told Huo that although he was a long-time customer, picking fights in the store was going too far. Or did he have a different opinion? Qing shouted, pointing her index finger at Liu. This miner had broken Huo's weapon first, which is why he attacked him. He looked at him sternly and wondered, could it really be the miner? Defa asked if the sword in his hand had actually broken Huo's weapon. Liu noted with a smile that Huo had struck first. What was his fault if his weapon had broken? He asked Huo if that was really how it was. Then Defa whispered that his weapon was unusual. Did he agree to play by the old rules? Huo chuckled and whispered that they had an agreement. He would take the money and he would get the goods. He declared that Huo trusted him, and he would solve this problem. Could he see this sword? The protagonist held out the weapon and said he could take it. Defa, dumbfounded, picked up the weapon and thought, is this a sword that weighs over 100 pounds? He held it so easily. So, was he awakened? He had to assess its strength first. He asked where a miner like him got such a powerful weapon. The protagonist asked, since when did the black market require identification and source information? Defa remarked that he was simply curious. If he didn't want to share this information, that was fine. MC wondered if he was really trying to find out about him. Li Yi said he had no secrets. He found it while digging. He thought with a chuckle that, as expected, he was a low-class miner. Defa noted that the sword was strong, but it had no enchantments or attributes. The price of this weapon was a maximum of $100. And Huo's weapon would be valued at around 2 million if it hadn't broken. Considering that he was just a miner and his life was difficult, he was willing to buy this useless sword. He'll also pay Huo 2 million for the damage, and he'll cover the rest. He can just think he's helping him. What does Huo think about this? Huo said he doesn't mind because Defa's boss intervened, so he'll forget about it. Qing, dumbfounded, said it was impossible. Where would that scum of a miner dig up 2 million? And what about the transport he promised her? He said with a grin that she shouldn't worry. If he sells his organs, he'll have 2 million. She said that's great then. The protagonist asked, so they've already planned everything, right? Defa asked, as his guards approached him, if he had any problems. The protagonist said with a grin that they could enjoy this moment because he wasn't the one who needed to worry. MC activated his abilities, covering his body with a dark aura. The seller shouted, rushing forward, that they needed to grab him. Defa smiled and remarked that these fights were boring to watch. He suggested they go to the tea room and wait for the results. Huo agreed. To their surprise, the guard was thrown into the wall. He shouted that they needed to be careful. If they broke anything here, he wouldn't be able to compensate him later. At that moment, Li kicked the others in their direction. Huo threw the salesman back and shouted that working in the mine seemed to be paying off. He had plenty of physical strength. The protagonist glared at him and declared that it was his turn. Qing shouted, "Since when did the miner have such fighting skills?" He gritted his teeth and used his abilities to declare that he recognized him. With such power, he could easily destroy several losers. However, he's still weak against D rank. At the last moment, the protagonist punched his opponent in the face, sending him flying. Huo screamed furiously, concentrating energy in his hand. Even his father hadn't hit him, yet he dared to punch him in the face. He screamed, using his abilities, that he would definitely die. MC blocked the enemy's blow, and Huo screamed in surprise. What was that? It was like an invisible wall in front of him. Li Yi retorted, calling him an idiot. If his father hadn't raised him, he would personally train him. He fearfully said that he shouldn't go near him. Qing screamed at Huo, "Isn't he an advanced D rank? Why was he having trouble defeating a mere minor?" The protagonist used shadow manifestation, spider shadow, to pin the opponent in place. She screamed in fear. "What's going on?" Huo asked. "So he's not just a minor, he's awakened. Could he really be a C rank or maybe even a B rank?" The protagonist spread his arms and noted that the guild had decided he was an E rank minor. He shouted that he didn't believe it. After MC raised his hand to strike, Huo shouted through clenched teeth that he was asking him to stop. He was part of an organization, the Black Panther. If he touched him, it would mean he had declared war on that organization. Li Yi asked, his expression changing. Could it really be about the loan sharks, the Black Panther? The protagonist shouted, hitting him with his fist. So does that mean he's really part of that organization? Qing screamed in fear as the protagonist kicked the opponent into the wall. The protagonist declared with a furious glare that he hated loan sharks the most. Suddenly, Dafa shouted, about to strike him from behind, that he must die. MC activated his dark aura and shouted, stopping his attack, that he better not interfere. Huo shouted in fear, saying it was a misunderstanding. He has 100,000. He's offering him friendship. They need to forget about what happened today. Li Yi asked menacingly, so one punch to his face is only worth a few thousand? He shouted that he was offering him 500,000, even 1,000,000, but he had to stop hitting him. The protagonist used his abilities and asked, doesn't he like lending people a lot of money? They should value him at his own rate. These 50 punches were just the beginning. Now they would get to the most interesting part. Huo shouted, taking out his bank card, that he was offering him 5 million. He was giving him everything. He had no more. The protagonist thought, so he has an NG Group VIP card? Does that mean he's one of those people who collects debts for this organization and forces people to go to the mine? In that case, he needs to get important information from him. He terrifiedly declared that he had no more money. He swears it. MC pointed out that the Black Panther organization had confiscated several million from him over the past few years. He would consider this a return of the money to whom it rightfully belonged. After a while, Qing asked, helping him up, if he was okay. Huo asked, didn't she say he was an ordinary miner? She asked how she knew he had become so strong. He shouted, hitting her, that if she hadn't encouraged him with these words, he wouldn't have relaxed and been attacked. Huo furiously thought, using his phone, that his money wouldn't be taken away so easily. He would definitely teach him a lesson. The head of the Black Panther organization asked what was wrong. He told him that he was asking him to intercede for him. Someone had just stolen his sword, which he was going to give him as a gift, and was threatening to destroy their organization. He said with an evil grin that he was waiting for information about him. His henchmen asked what they should do with the others. They had already taken the goods. The loan shark leader asked if anyone else was here. He used his abilities and declared that of course not. He noted that the guy Huo mentioned was on him. Whether he left him alive or dead was all the same to him. Sometime later, at the Awakened Guild, a staff member asked with a smile if he could help him with anything. The protagonist noted that he was an E-rank awakened. He would like to see if there were any missions for his rank. The people asked with a smirk, was the E-rank trash in the wrong place? The lowest trials are D-rank. Does he really want to die? It's quite funny to watch. He's just trash. He said, addressing the E-rank, that he was asking him to leave here and wait outside. The team that needs his help should contact him themselves. They stated that his place was right next to the trash can at the entrance. The protagonist glanced at his phone screen and thought that the 5 million he'd received had been instantly snatched by debt collectors. His priority now was getting the quest. Suddenly, everyone felt a strong pressure, and the awakened ones declared that such pressure could only be caused by an awakened minimum B rank. They couldn't even move. The MC looked at the girl, who emanated a terrifying aura, with a smirk on her face. They asked why an advanced B-ranker had come here. Li Yi, using his abilities, thought that she radiated powerful energy, and yet from the outside, she looked like just a rich girl. He didn't sense any killing intent. Was she hiding it? She was so vibrant, yet so reserved, which gave her a contradictory impression. The masked employee announced that the D-rank monster Abyss needed a D-rank miner. Anyone interested? The awakened asked in surprise, isn't this guy an E-rank? Why isn't he reacting to her B-rank aura? Most of their legs were already shaking. Shouldn't an E-rank guy be kneeling? He even took a step forward. The protagonist thought with a smile, so that means he'll be volunteering. Cian, the awakened B-rank, thought, this guy's just a regular miner, right? And he feels fine under her B-rank pressure? That's quite interesting. At this time, the man said that he had many good D-rank candidates if she wanted to look at them. To everyone's surprise, she said, looking at Li Yi, that she had already made her choice. He, dumbfounded, declared that he had arrived late and was not on any lists. This violated their organization's internal rules. She furiously said that she was the rule. She needed him. Afterwards, the employee thought that this was the first time he had seen Cian choose someone herself. Who is this miner? After some time, they fought against the monster, and the protagonist thought, looking at the team's composition, that the Minotaurs didn't stand a chance against them. They had excellent teamwork, and a B rank was leading the process. Everything seemed to be going without incident. MC thought, using his abilities, that he had, however, detected Minotaurs below. This abyssal monster was obviously much higher than rank D. Couldn't the others see it? Qingtian noted that his shadow sense had reached level 2. This meant his vision had become much better than that trash's. Li thought he could understand why the rest of the group couldn't see it. However, why didn't even the girl notice? Or perhaps she knew, but for some reason, she decided to hide it. Luden the Bard said that, judging by the information, the crystal vein of starlight was below. Cian declared that the miner should come with her. The protagonist wondered what was going on. She knows it's dangerous, but she still takes the miner with her? The dangerous aura grows stronger with each passing second. Does this girl not care if the miners or her allies die? Or does she think her B-rank strength can protect everyone? Suddenly, the rock beneath their feet disappeared, and they began to fall downwards, landing on their feet. The D-rank Minotaur glared at them, holding a weapon in his hands. The protagonist thought, looking at the girl, that the awakened B-rank was about to take action. She took out her weapon, and then the girl hesitated and hid behind him, saying that the miner needed to go ahead and she would cover him. MC shouted in irritation, "Is she serious? He's just a miner." She trembled and declared, sitting on the ground, that she didn't care. He just had to go there. Li pointed out that she was a B rank, but she didn't want to go. So how was an E-rank miner supposed to handle this? The protagonist thought he was making a living as a miner. Why risk his life? She cried out with tears in her eyes that she was ready to pay him $1 million. He just needed to go there and deal with them. The protagonist declared with a smirk, using his abilities, that for that kind of money, he would act even if he didn't want to. It was time for them to move forward. The Minotaurs rushed at him with weapons, and the protagonist blocked one opponent while the others ran towards the girl. Li Yi thought he wouldn't let his $1 million go to waste. At that moment, Cian used her abilities, and the protagonist shouted that she had decided to attack. He was too worried about her. The monster pounced on her, and at that moment the protagonist drew his weapon and threw the enemy back. The protagonist asked with a smile, turning to Cian, if she was really that easily angered. At that moment, the girl ran away and said that she was leaving the rest of the opponents to him. Li Yi used a series of strikes to cut down the opponents in front of him, and noted with annoyance that she was unreliable. After a while, she said, as the Minotaur approached from behind, that she would be safe here. Cian turned around, dumbfounded, and asked, "What does that mean? Why isn't this monster afraid of her?" The monster swung its weapon, and the protagonist thought it was strange. She could definitely fight back, so why was she afraid? Then, the Minotaur caught the bracelet on the girl's arm with its weapon, and an energy barrier suddenly formed around her, knocking the monster back. At the last moment, the protagonist dodged the flying Minotaur and wondered if this was a defensive element. So, she wasn't attacking with her own power? MC asked, so she's not a combat type awakened? She looked embarrassed and said he shouldn't tell anyone about this. Li chuckled and, preparing for battle, declared that she would have to pay more because of this. But why were these Minotaurs attacking only her? The protagonist activated Shadow Sense level 2 and thought it was hiding its presence. No wonder he didn't notice this silhouette at first. The Minotaur's strange behavior was due to these incomprehensible fluctuations. The girl screamed in fear, turning to the miner. The protagonist clicked his tongue in displeasure and destroyed the enemy with a single blow. Noting that this was a constant problem, MC thought this was bad. More and more Minotaurs were gathering here. He can't use AoE skills because there is a chance to harm Cian. If they didn't get out soon, he would definitely exhaust all his strength. If the enemy was targeting Cian, he would use it against them and surrender her. Li stated after stopping the monsters with his ability that her defensive elements were already exhausted. She wasn't a combat awakened, so she needed to be careful not to be ambushed. She cried out with embarrassment. Why say this so loudly? At that moment, the unknown opponent chuckled, thinking that only a simple miner had almost ruined his plan. She wasn't a combat awakened without protection. He would personally destroy her. He raised his dagger to strike and thought that she could blame her ungrateful father. Unexpectedly, the protagonist dealt a critical hit to his opponent and saved the girl from a blade strike. Looking at Bard, the protagonist noticed that he was using infrasound to control the Minotaurs and attack her. She screamed at Luden, asking if it really was him. Luden, a D-rank control type, chuckled and said he really had lost to the miner, That was reckless of him. He used his abilities and declared that it was too early for him to think he had already won. He wanted to show him how terrifying control abilities could be. MC noticed with irritation that he had a C-rank aura. Cian said with horror that Luden was feeding on the monster's life energy. Where did the lava come from? Perhaps he was turning into a C-rank lava minotaur? Li asked with a smile. So, he'd upgraded his powers from D-rank to C-rank? The protagonist, preparing for battle, thought that such an advantage could be considered cheating. Even he felt worthless. The C-rank monster roared furiously and was about to attack the two awakened D-ranks. The protagonist used his abilities to defend against the opponent's attack. Then, looking at the gap in the barrier, MC thought, so, a C-rank is this strong? They both couldn't handle this monster. She worriedly said that he was injured. The C-rank lava minotaur prepared to deliver a crushing blow, but Li Yi grabbed the girl's arm and shouted, running away from the opponent, that she needed to hold on tightly. The monster, bound by shadows, asked why it couldn't move. She asked if it had control skills too. The protagonist noted that he couldn't hold it for long. She needed to run while she could. She needed to listen to him. When she reached the labyrinth, she just needed to run forward as far as she could. Cian asked if he wouldn't run with her. The protagonist declared that he needed to delay the enemy to buy her time to escape. She needed to hide well. He'd find her soon. The MC thought with a smile, she's $1 million investment after all. The C-rank lava minotaur looked around and said that this was bad. Where were they going? Li asked if he was looking for someone. He shouted, rushing at him. Where is Cian now? A thunderous blow was heard, and the protagonist, dodging, declared that he needed to find out for himself. The protagonist struck the opponent's leg with his weapon, after which the MC was dumbfounded, thinking he couldn't damage him. The monster declared, calling him an idiot for trying to damage a rock with his weapon. Li dodged the enemy's strike and thought that it would be difficult to dodge so much lava. First, he'll lure the enemy into the open. He shouted that he was running like a rat. Is that all he can do? The protagonist thought, using his shadow eye, that no matter how strong the opponent was, he had to have a weak spot. The monster shouted that once he killed him, he would go after Cian. He had to die as soon as possible. The protagonist thought, seeing the purple haze, that he'd found it. MC prepared to strike, and he asked, raising his fist to strike. Does he really think he doesn't know what he's thinking? Before absolute strength, any petty tricks are useless. Then, Li Yi gritted his teeth and thought that his strength was terrifying. So this is C-rank? The monster shouted as he rushed forward, but this time he needed to watch where he was going. The protagonist assumed a fighting stance and thought that he needed to wait for the right moment. He asked, isn't he running? He's still trying to hurt him with a dagger? It's useless. That kind of junk is only good for scratching him. The protagonist dodged and thought that when he struck again, he would have to act. Suddenly, MC prepared to strike his opponent from behind, but to his surprise, he felt an intense heat. Li thought that even shadow energy couldn't completely block this heat. The protagonist chuckled and said that he was smarter than he looked. The protagonist thought that the opponent knew how to protect his weak point. The C-rank lava minotaur declared that although he didn't know, he had indeed discovered his weakness. However, even knowing this was useless to him. The temperature there was over 2,000 degrees Celsius. He had to tell him where Cian was now, and then he would spare him. MC remarked with a smile that he was a traitor who had sold out his masters for profit and who was feeding at the enemy's hands. He dared not trust such a man. He furiously shouted that he himself was asking for death. Let him try to survive the blow of his axe. If he is not a coward, then he must fight. Li dodged the blow and used his shadow incarnation, a chain blade. The protagonist noted when the opponent dodged his attack that he spoke as if he himself wasn't dodging. The protagonist thought he should immediately use a rope dart. At that moment, his shadow attack approached the monster's weak point, but in the end, his ability couldn't withstand the heat emanating from the enemy. He shouted with a laugh, swinging his axe to strike, that it was useless. MC became angry and thought he was a problematic opponent. The monster shouted, swinging its axe, that he should stop resisting. Li, dodging his opponent's attack, thought that he was draining too much shadow energy. He might even lose at this rate. Would he really have to call for Qingtian? Suddenly, the protagonist rushed forward and thought that death battle was better than letting Qingtian's body be controlled again. Besides, killing a C-rank monster could earn him a lot of experience. He couldn't miss such a chance. The protagonist was about to land a critical hit on his opponent's weak spot and thought, so it's invulnerable. He doesn't believe it. He'll destroy this creature. The lava minotaur let out a cry of pain, and the system window reported that the monster's HP was approaching 0. Chaos Fury activated. Attack plus 1200%. Critical chance and speed plus 200%. The monster shouted, knocking him back, that he should retreat. What had angered the protagonist so much? Li crashed into the stone wall with a thud, and the lava minotaur remarked that the scum miner had dealt him such a serious blow. The protagonist struggled to his feet and thought his blows were inflicting fire damage. He declared that his end had come. Suddenly, the protagonist felt a surge of power and wondered what was going on. The shadow energy had become much more powerful, as if it were overflowing from within his body. Qingtian noted that such power had always been within him. It was just that his body, not tempered by heat, was unable to release it. Due to a fluke, he had unlocked a new form of shadow energy. MC said, raising his hand, that the shadow energy was healing his wounds. A system window appeared, informing that the shadow enhancement had awakened. Initial level. He said that this wasn't just a simple healing. The C-rank lava minotaur thought, this can't be. How can he recover so quickly? And the aura emanating from him is much more frightening. He couldn't give him time to recover. He needed to finish him off. Li Yi dodged the enemy's attack, and his opponent thought, this guy can keep up with his speed. Was that really a threefold increase? It couldn't be. Was he really just an E rank? He furiously shouted that he would fill the area with lava. He wants to see what he'll do when he has nowhere to run. Let the magma incinerate him to ashes. After a while, the protagonist asked with a grin, so this is a shadow enhancement? The protagonist thought the initial level was already capable of something like this. He wondered what the maximum level would be. MC chuckled, claiming his attacks lacked heat. The monster cried out in confusion that this couldn't be true. Li Yi remarked that he had recently dealt him a good blow. However, now it was his turn to attack. The protagonist flew towards the enemy and screamed. He confidently raised his weapon. MC dealt multiple blows to the enemy and landed on the ground. The system window notified that this was a shadow enhancement. Defense, strength, and speed were increased by 200%. The Minotaur gritted his teeth in pain and thought it was his arm. He swung his arm angrily and called the protagonist a freak. Li Yi instantly crossed blades, preparing to attack the enemy. The protagonist, swinging his weapons, flew to the side and wondered if charged strikes from a distance also worked with the enhancement. The Minotaur enveloped his hands in flames and snorted. He threw his head back in fury and screamed that as long as there was magma, he would regenerate infinitely. MC's attacks had very little effect. Li Yi tensed and asked, is it really infinite regeneration? That was doubtful. The enemy's energy was noticeably weakening. The Minotaur quickly raised his swords and yelled at the protagonist to try again. MC rushed towards the enemy with great speed. The Minotaur roared decisively at the protagonist to do it again. He looked at his unarmed hands in bewilderment and asked how this happened. Li Yi raised his blade and noticed that the enemy's energy was at its limit. He ordered the enemy to surrender. The Minotaur yelled in fear that they were not enemies. Why would they need a mortal fight? The protagonist disagreed and clarified that Xian had paid for her safety. The Minotaur shouted with great fear that money was no problem. He asked to give him Xian, and upon returning to Rongcheng, he would give MC even more. Li Yi used his ability and asked if the enemy would change his mind, or would the enemy set him on him, and he would lose his life. The Minotaur raised his hands and yelled that this was not so. Does he really look like a vile oathbreaker? MC smirked and noted that his opponent reminded him of him. To betray such a traitor as the Minotaur into the hands of Xiaoshang, Xian's father. Li Yi thinks that Xiaoshang is very interested in those who harmed his daughter, saved Xiaoshang's daughter, exposed the traitor. This will earn him personal gratitude from the leader of the 3rd Street Logmen. This is worth much more than 5 million. The Minotaur thought that in the hands of Xiaoshang, life would be more painful than death, and the organization will not spare his family. He quickly picked up the shard and yelled at the protagonist not to say goodbye to it. Qingqian shouted, where did the Minotaur get the shard of the gate of another prison? If the shard is destroyed, the only connection between the Beast Abyss and the world will be severed. The gate will collapse and they will all remain here forever. The Minotaur smirked and laughed, noting that MC achieved this on his own. A beam of mana flew swiftly past the Minotaur's hand. Li Yi snatched the shard, and the Minotaur looked at his hand in bewilderment. The protagonist plunged the blade into the magma in his opponent's body and commanded him to die. The Minotaur raised his hands and screamed in intense pain. Numerous dark beams pierced the Minotaur's body. He instantly fell to the ground, exhausted. MC, standing amidst dark streams of energy, exclaimed, so that's where the previous Minotaur's energy cores went. They're all here. The system window notifies that the skill has been improved. Shadow Eye, true Shadow Eye. The ground instantly shook and MC tensed up. Qingqian exclaimed that without the Magma Minotaur's energy, the Beast Abyss is collapsing. Sometime later, at the exit of the Beast Abyss, the guy noted that he almost died of fear. His comrade added that he didn't expect the tremors. It's good that they survived. Xian exclaimed that she didn't think the protagonist was so strong. Much higher than E-class. He doesn't want to join Logman. Father will generously reward such a fighter. MC replied that he has no plans to join anyone yet. As for his abilities, he asks to keep it a secret. Xian asked him to think about it carefully, and, holding out the card, noted that here was money. Li Yi took the card and thanked her. He instantly raised the sword and asked, will her logman accept this? Xian noted that it had 0 energy, but the material was unusual. She would take it for appraisal. The protagonist will receive whatever they say, not a penny less. MC, smiling, moved aside and exclaimed that they had a deal. He was waiting for news. Li Yi thought that Xian seemed to understand weapons. There will be no problem selling all this junk. After some time, MC thought that if she was one of those merchants, Zhou Ting or Old Man Wang, the money was already his. The protagonist had made the right choice. Li Yi looked at the fragment of the gate of another prison and asked, what is this thing? Is it so important? Qingqian said that only the protagonist collects enough fragments, and he will elevate MC to S-class and above. He thought that the fragments of the gate of another prison were here again. Are those freaks still active? We need to speed up the recovery. This guy is the key. In the coming days, when we will have to fight those who are beyond human comprehension. Should I tell this fool now? No, it's too early. The Overlord will only instill fear. It is better to first strengthen the protagonist. Sometime later, in the NG Corporation, in the E-Class Giddy Zone, it is closed due to an accident at the mine. The protagonist noticed that there was 1 B rank and 3 C rank guards. MC thought they had posted advanced guards. Li clarified that it was as it was. With his strength, the truth would never be revealed. Qingtian exclaimed that this meant nothing. A regular E-Class rift. What was there to look for? The protagonist sternly barked that his parents had died there and that the truth about their deaths was true. He was lost in his memories. Kui Shihao threw money on the table and told the protagonist to take 200,000. This is compensation from NG Group for the loss of parents. MC must take the money, sign the accident papers. Shihao yelled in irritation. Was that really not enough? Li Yi looked at the money with a crazed expression and replied that he wanted the truth. Shihao grinned maliciously and, hitting the protagonist on the head, barked that it was an accident. MC's parents and the miners were all dead. Li Yi angrily pushed Shihao away and shouted that this couldn't be happening. They were C-ranked. What accident? The protagonist yelled that they were definitely alive and ordered them to let him through. The guard instantly grabbed MC by the jacket and replied that anything was possible here. Li angrily barked that they were E-ranked. There were humanoids there too. Even if they attacked, they would have easily fought back. The guard became very angry and asked, did MC decide to get more money? Was he really tired of life? He quickly raised his fist, intending to strike. The president of NG Group, an advanced A-ranked Ning Donghao, entered the room. Shihao looked at the president, and the guard instantly froze. Donghao clarified that he had ordered them to reassure the families of the victims and asked, is this Shihao reassuring? The president knelt down and handed MC money, asking the protagonist to take it. He clarified that 200,000 was not a large sum, but it would help in difficult times. Li Yi, sitting on the floor, yelled that he didn't need money, only the truth. Donghao agreed with a smile and promised that they would sort everything out. Li Yi came out of his memories and thought that back then he believed that with the president's promise, the truth about his parents' deaths would soon come to light. But in return, his parents were accused of theft, and the protagonist was presented with a bill for millions. Qingchen switched to energy-saving mode and thought that any race without power will only be a victim. So instead of empty tears, the protagonist must obtain another fragment of the gate of another prison. MC will gain power, and the whole truth will be a matter of one phrase. Li Yi thought he knew it. If not for Qingchen's shadow energy, which is undetectable, if he hadn't been enrolled in the E-rank miners, at least someone would have invited him to the team. Sometimes Qingchen threatens to take over the body, sometimes gives strength. Is Qingchen a friend or an enemy? And why did the Overlord shrink so much? Has his strength really diminished? And if Qingtian really went crazy, then isn't it true about the S-rank? Qingtian furiously yelled at the protagonist to stop. If it weren't for MC's talent, he wouldn't have even gotten attention. Li exclaimed that he was silent. Why is the Overlord cursing? The protagonist wondered if there was a way to cure this. MC looked at his phone and asked, is this a mission invitation? After some time, in the industrial zone of a D-class Gidi, the gate of another prison, a man standing at the gate asked why the protagonist was so late. MC apologized and replied that he was from far away. Li thought that he had just come from another E-class Gidi. The protagonist exclaimed that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Is Hao Wu also on a mission? Uncle Hao smiled, touched the protagonist's hand, and exclaimed that MC had grown so much. 5 years had passed since what happened to his parents. Advanced C-rank mercenaries Gu Er, Gu Da, and Gu San stood sternly before the man. Er exclaimed irritably that he thought they were waiting for an important person. But here was a minor freak. The man smiled tensely and, after apologizing, said that the task was related to ore mining. They didn't dare disturb the advanced ones. Er pointed at him and exclaimed that they needed to stop talking and get straight to the point. The man said that the rift was a D-class Gidi. The goal was to find Xuanbing ore and extract 60 kilograms of samples. The protagonist thought about it. A D-class Gidi and 4 C-ranks? That's too much. Judging by their evil aura, they're freaks. And MC senses another C-rank in Guidi. An advanced C-rank mercenary, Heidzi stands apart from the other mercenaries. At the same time, the second leader of the Black Panther gang, Shui Bao, looked at his phone at what was happening near the portal and noticed that all the toys were assembled. He raised his hand with a crazy smile and exclaimed that the hunt was open. After some time, Hao Wu asked if the protagonist needed a protective suit. MC, holding his hands in his pockets, disagreed and replied that he was now advanced and could handle it. San grinned and clarified, an advanced miner? That's a huge rarity. Er smiled and asked the third to be gentler. After all, the protagonist is the king of the trash heap, right? Hao Wu seriously asked Li not to mess with them. The protagonist asked his uncle not to worry and clarified that he was not like that. MC tensed up, thinking that the vegetation here seemed to have been deliberately trimmed for cover, and it seemed to him that death was lurking somewhere. Li noticed a beam of mana and wondered if he was really itching to attack. He turned his attention to Heitzi and thought that the C-ranker seemed to have sensed something too. Did he want to watch from the shadows, or did he have other plans? San crossed his arms and ordered the trash to move faster and not stop. Hao Wu replied that they were speeding up. Li thought that was very good. He was using the landscape to break away and find out what was going on. The protagonist quickly grabbed Uncle Hao's hand and asked him to hold on tight. MC ran forward at incredible speed, and San yelled, "Is a miner supposed to be that fast?" The mercenary ordered them to stop, or raised his hand in irritation and asked the third to ignore them. Two trash without them are dead freaks. At the same time, Bao, sitting in a tree, thought that the three had hidden. Did they really sense danger? He licked his lips madly and thought that was even better. If everyone were like these three fools, the game would be boring. Da turned to the boss and remarked that he found this mission suspicious. It seemed like someone was watching from the very entrance, or asked him not to worry. With 3 C ranks, a D-class beauty means nothing to them. San disagreed and said that he also sensed something bad. A monster is frightened prey. Maybe they will return? Or asked furiously, what is the third one afraid of? Suddenly, they fell into a stupor, seeing something. Bao appeared behind San, and his comrades quickly jumped to the sides. Bao wrapped San in threads and clarified, the game has only just begun, and they are already getting ready to leave? San tensely clenched his teeth and yelled that it was a bloody leopard, or decisively ordered his third brother to be released. The bloody leopard can make demands. They'll come to an agreement. San asked his brother to save him. Bao noted that the 3 brothers were always challenging their gang of Black Panthers. He smiled and, swiftly cutting San with threads, yelled, "What's there to negotiate about?" The brothers instantly fell into a stupor at the sight of blood. Da, raising his fist in rage, leaped toward his opponent and yelled that he would kill the bloody leopard, or anxiously extended his hand toward him and asked the other to stop. The thread instantly wrapped around Da's arm. He froze in place, and Bao exclaimed that Da was beneath his rank. The threads cut Da into pieces, or looked at his dead brother in fear. He quickly ran toward the forest, and Bao, laughing madly, yelled that cool water is the most delicious. After a while, the protagonist, sitting by the fire, invited Uncle Hao to take a break. Uncle Hao asked why MC had broken away from those advanced members. MC asked if Uncle had made any enemies recently. Hao Wu replied that he was a simple miner, so why would he quarrel with people? What's wrong? Li confidently exclaimed that this mission was a trap. Someone wanted to bury them all here. Hao Wu asked not to scare him. MC clarified that if Uncle Hao knew anything, it would be better to tell him. Angrily pointed his finger at the protagonist and yelled that Li Yi had immediately understood everything, but had remained silent and had led his brothers to death. The protagonist got up from the log and noted that it turned out the mercenary wasn't completely useless. At least the mercenary had brought the real culprit to light before his death. Angrily asked what the protagonist said. MC, with a terrifying look, brought his fingers to his neck and replied that he had said that the mercenary would soon die. Fearfully raised his hand and touched the threads, asking, when did this happen? Bao ominously licked the threads and exclaimed that he didn't think a miner would be interesting. The protagonist activated the truthful shadow eye. Bao landed on the ground, and Hao Wu screamed in fear that it was a bloody leopard. He begged Bao to let them go. They were simple miners and not his enemies. The system window notified that Bao was a C-rank person. His skill was blood webs, high-frequency vibration for a cutting effect, and his attack range was 10 meters. Bao terrifyingly replied that Uncle Hao wasn't his enemy. If not for his uncle's drunken chatter, they wouldn't have known about him. The man who had escaped the net. Hao Wu exclaimed that he wouldn't say a word about that matter. Bao smiled ominously and, raising his hand, remarked that he had always believed in one truth. The protagonist warned Uncle Hao about the attack. Bao pierced Uncle Hao's body with a thread and added that only the dead can keep secrets. MC gritted his teeth in irritation and called the bloody leopard a freak. He instantly appeared in front of Bao, crossing blades. Li Yi swung his weapons, intending to attack. Bao, dodging the attacks, exclaimed that he didn't think a miner could fight. MC didn't defeat that Huo for nothing, but the protagonist is no match for him. Bao delivered a powerful attack and shattered the earth, but Li Yi managed to jump up. He quickly ran towards the protagonist and yelled that if MC wanted to die first, he would. Li Yi activated shadow enhancement. Bao launched an attack, but the protagonist managed to block it. MC, with a wound on his cheek, thought, even shadow enhancement can't withstand an enemy's blow? Bao swiftly waved his hand and MC flew to the side. Li Yi hit a tree and the opponent looked at him. Hao Wu called out to the protagonist, and MC, kneeling, asked his uncle not to come any closer. Li Yi thought that the opponent was stronger in close combat. They needed to change tactics. Bao smiled ominously, and sticking his tongue out of his mouth, asked the protagonist not to rush because they would both die today. MC activated his truthful shadow eye and yelled, who's who? He used his shadow incarnation, a dagger. Bao calmly deflected the daggers with threads and asked, is that all? The protagonist instantly leaped toward him and yelled, of course not. Bao smiled and remarked that the miner had quite a few secret weapons. He waved his hand, cutting MC's sword, and added that it was a pity the protagonist was only E rank. The ground cracked under Bao's feet. Hazy emerged from the ground and screamed for the blood to die. He wrapped his arms around the enemy's body, and Bao calmly said that he thought the mercenary would hide in the bushes until the very end. It's a pity that Hazy's skill is also his main flaw. Close combat is his main skill. Hazy asked fearfully, what does this mean? Bao raised his hands, commanding the enemy to die, and the threads instantly cut Hazy. The protagonist wondered, How could the enemy eliminate a C-rank so quickly? Hao Wu and MC ran towards the forest. Li Yi noted that their strength was too different. They need to run while they have the chance. Bao smirked, covered his eye with his hand and asked, where will they go? After some time, under the moon, the protagonist, kneeling in front of Uncle Hao, clarified that he would first bandage him and then try to lead him out at night. Uncle Hao asked MC to go alone, saying that he would only drag him back. Li Yi asked what Hao Wu had done. Why did the blood leopard want him dead? Hao Wu replied that it was because he seemed to have learned the truth about the protagonist's parents' deaths. MC barked in horror. Hao Wu said he found out. Li Yi placed his hands on Uncle Hao's shoulders and asked what Uncle Hao knew. He ordered him to speak up. Uncle Hao replied that he hadn't been sure before, but since the blood leopard was sent after him, that meant Shi Hao was involved. Back then, even before the mine accident, the protagonist's father told him that he suspected Shi Hao of conducting dangerous experiments in the mining area. A few days later, the accident occurred and MC's parents were accused of stealing ore. Li Yi grabbed him by the clothes and yelled, "Why did Hao Wu keep quiet all these years?" Uncle Hao burst into tears and replied that he had failed them. But he's a simple miner. He couldn't lose his job because he has a family. The protagonist let him go and shouted, "Did Hao Wu let his parents die under a false stigma?" Uncle Hao turned his head to the side and said he was very ashamed. He got drunk out of remorse and let it slip, for which he paid. Bao instantly directed the threads towards Uncle Hao. The protagonist tensed up greatly and called out to Uncle Hao. The threads quickly contracted. Hao Wu smiled and asked for forgiveness. Before he died, he asked MC not to blame him. Bao smirked and exclaimed that this is why the protagonist seemed familiar to him. It turns out MC is the son of those two C-ranks. He quickly ran towards Li Yi and ordered him to go to his parents. The protagonist replied that this would never happen. They simultaneously struck each other. Multiple wounds appeared on MC's body. Bao raised his hand and asked, "Is it nice to see his flesh being cut into pieces?" Li Yi exclaimed that the enemy's defense wasn't so good. He created a shadow incarnation, a two-handed sword. MC, with blood streaming down his face, thought that when the enemy attacks, his defense is at its weakest. He swiftly struck his opponent and Bao screamed, "What is this?" Bao slid backwards at incredible speed, raising smoke from his feet. He noted with fury, wound after wound, and he's an angry guy. Li Yi knelt down and wondered if he was already at his limit. Bao smirked and noted that the protagonist was simply lying. The threads approached MC's body. Bao said that if the protagonist weren't rank E, he would have died. He hung Li Yi on the threads and mockingly asked the protagonist to kill him. Did he really just decide to kill him with a look? Bao laughed and exclaimed that he loved it when damned freaks like MC looked at him with such impotent fury. To make the protagonist's gaze even more desperate, he revealed a secret. Hao had only guessed part of the truth. MC's parents didn't die in the avalanche. Bao grinned madly and, licking his lips, screamed that he killed them. That look, the protagonist's father had looked the same way when Bao stabbed MC's mother. He had watched helplessly as he killed her. Li turned to the blood leopard, and Bao, enraged, wondered if his threads had been burned through. The protagonist instantly enveloped his body in terrifying mana and, throwing his threads aside, screamed that the leopard was a freak. He stood on the ground with the shadow of the overlord behind him. MC gritted his teeth ominously and screamed that he would kill his opponent. Qingchen thought that, as expected, hatred had awakened the shadow power in this guy. The system window notified that it had detected a sharp surge of shadow energy. Level adjustment in progress. Adjustment complete. Rank C. Shadow enhancement. First stage. Second stage. Awakening the skill. Shadow step. Allows one to dissolve into the shadows and emerge from any other bound shadow. Bao wondered, such severe injuries and everyone had healed? The protagonist can also heal? He directed the threads towards MC and shouted that prey fighting to the last. That's what's truly interesting. Li smiled calmly and clarified, was it really prey? Under the shadow of the shadow, the leopard is prey. The protagonist used Shadow Step and appeared behind the enemy. Bao wondered why the enemy's strength had suddenly increased so much. He angrily turned his head to the side and noted that the speed was quite good. Bao waved his hand and exclaimed that it was a pity that it still wasn't enough to kill him. MC rose into the sky and, throwing blades at the enemy, ordered Bao to try it out. Bao smirked, stopped the blades with threads, and replied that it wouldn't work on him. The system window notified that Shadow Step Instant Flash activates Shadow Step on the thrown weapon to instantly move to it. Li Yi instantly appeared in front of the enemy. He swung his blade and asked, what about this one? Bao stopped the attack with threads and yelled that it didn't matter. The protagonist's toy knives wouldn't penetrate his defense. MC instantly disappeared, and Bao tensed up. Li Yi appeared to the side and clarified, who told the enemy he was aiming for the leopard? The enemy can't attack and defend simultaneously, because the speed of controlling the blood threads lags behind the leopard's reaction speed, and that is the enemy's weakness. Li Yi ran past the enemy with lightning speed, unleashing multiple attacks. Bao coughed up blood and screamed that this couldn't be. He knelt down, pressed his hand to the wound, and asked how he could lose to some miner. The protagonist pointed his weapon at the enemy and ordered him to speak. What really happened back in the mine? Bao angrily ordered MC to leave him alone. Li Yi instantly swung his weapon and chopped off the enemy's arm. Bao screamed in intense pain. MC sternly noted that his patience was running out. Bao clarified, what can you tell him? The protagonist won't change anything anyway? Shi Hao did all this. Then MC's father caught him experimenting, and to hide the truth, Shihao ordered them to kill the protagonist's parents and stage an accident. The protagonist learned that this was a man from NG Group and got scared. Bao wanted to offer some advice, but Li instantly chopped off his head. The protagonist sternly said that everyone involved in his parents' death would pay for it. Sometime later, at the NG Group headquarters, MC watches Shihao standing in the rain. Qingchen noted that even though Li Yi had now risen to rank C, he must warn him not to interfere intentionally. After all, the protagonist senses the presence of an advanced rank A nearby. MC quickly ran after the car and replied that he knew. The founder of NG Group, advanced rank A Donghao, was also in the car. Li Yi asked the overlord not to worry and clarified that he was not so reckless as to attack Shihao right here. And the words of the bloody leopard cannot be trusted without proof. First, the protagonist must find out whether Shihao acted alone or whether the entire NG Group was behind this. Donghao would be better off not being involved. Otherwise, even at rank A debt of blood must be repaid with blood. Sometime later, at the Black Panther Gang's warehouse, MC wondered why Shihao needed to come here in the middle of the night. At the same time, in the warehouse building, Guangming sternly ordered him to be careful. This was lab equipment. Shihao brought a rag to his mouth and asked, "Is that old miner Hao dead?" Guangming replied that the blood leopard was gone, and the gate to another prison he used to infiltrate had also disappeared, so they couldn't say for sure if Hao Wu was alive. Shihao sternly asked, "What's going on? Isn't the blood leopard a C rank?" Guangming crossed his arms and suggested that the blood leopard had probably underestimated the enemy. Among those Bao was supposed to kill were 4 advanced C ranks. Shihao noted that this equipment also needed to be quickly transported inside to avoid unnecessary problems. Now is the key stage of the experiments. There can be no mistakes. Guangming clarified, the money was already prepared, right? Shihao asked him not to worry about the money. The protagonist became angry and thought that Shihao had really set everything up. Guangming instantly turned his head to the side, noticing something. He tore the box apart with flame and yelled, "Who's there?" Guangming wondered if he'd imagined it. He definitely felt the murderous impulse. The protagonist hid behind the wall and thought he'd almost been caught. C-rank strength is still not enough. After some time, Qin joined the group. Qingqian crossed his arms and yelled that MC would be better off looking for quests instead of standing here. Li entered the building and replied that he was here for the 3rd shard. He'll see how much they'll give for the weapon. The employee greeted him with a smile and asked how she could help. The protagonist said he needed Cian. The employee asked if they had an appointment. The girl, holding Xiaoshang's hand, mockingly pointed at the MC and yelled, "But he's a penniless miner. He doesn't belong here. And how dare he call the young master by his first name?" The girl looked lovingly at Xiaoshang and remarked that this penniless man even poisoned the air with his own breath. Xiaoshang yelled, "Aren't they going to kick the miner out of here?" The assistant exclaimed that he obeyed the master. Li Yi asked, "Is this Logman's hospitality?" The girl smirked and asked, "He? Penniless, a guest." She asked not to make her laugh. Xiaoshang exclaimed that the protagonist wasn't fit to be a dog in their Qin household. The MC wondered, are all the Qin family members this arrogant? It seemed there was no point in dealing with Cian. Li Yi headed for the exit and said that in that case, he was taking his leave. The girl clarified, "He thinks he'll leave?" "Never." Xiaoshang ordered his assistants to cripple the protagonist, and they quickly ran toward MC, intent on attacking. Li Yi used Shadow Step to push aside the assistants, and approaching Xiaoshang, grabbed him by the chin. The girl ordered him to immediately release Mr. Qin, otherwise the Qin family would not spare the protagonist. MC threw Xiaoshang forcefully at the girl, and they fell to the floor. Li Yi arrogantly clarified that today, out of respect for Cian, he would spare him. Xiaoshang furiously created an explosion and yelled, "Who is he anyway?" He rose up on the lava and exclaimed that he would kill MC right now. A man instantly appeared between them and stopped the opponents. Cian exclaimed that MC has a lot of courage to cause chaos in the Qin Group headquarters.